Hello and welcome back. In this video I will go over the cage setup for your chameleon and how to set it up. I will talk about what types of cages there are, what dimensions your cage should have. I will explain something about the temperature, lighting and humidity. I will briefly tell you about eating and drinking supplies and then continue about how this all comes together in your chameleon terrarium. Lastly, I'll tell you how many chameleons you can have inside your terrarium. I will put links in the description below so you can immediately go to the part you want to have more information on. Or if you have the time, just watch the whole video, as at the end of it you will know everything about a chameleon cage setup. There are two types of cages for a chameleon. There's a mesh or a net cage or a glass terrarium. A net cage is an enclosure that consists entirely out of netting or mesh. It's often foldable and very lightweight, and it will provide the maximum amount of ventilation for a chameleon. If you live in a humid climate, this is fine, but in most cages a net cage results in a too low level of air humidity. So if you don't live in a humid climate, this cage is probably not for you. Since I live in the Netherlands, I don't live in a humid climate, although it rains here most of the time. That's why I chose a terrarium. A terrarium consists mostly out of glass. A terrarium for a chameleon needs at least two sides with a portion of mesh for ventilation purposes. If you don't have pieces of mesh in your terrarium, the air inside the terrarium is not refreshed often enough, and because of this your chameleon can get respiratory infections or he can just get ill in general. There is also a chance that molds will start to grow inside your terrarium. The humidity and temperature is easier to control in a glass terrarium, but they are more expensive than a mesh terrarium. So the dimensions of a terrarium. The terrarium should be big enough so that a chameleon can walk around, climb and hide in plants. The chameleon likes to climb, and because of that the terrarium needs to be higher than it is wide. For an adult chameleon the terrarium should be at least 100 cm high, 60 cm wide and 60 cm deep. So don't go any smaller than this. And also for a terrarium, bigger is better. Young baby chameleons don't need such a big enclosure, especially if you don't hand feed them, as it is difficult for the chameleon to find live insects in a large terrarium. Let the terrarium grow with the size of your chameleon, or if you do have a bigger terrarium, just hand feed your baby chameleon. Just a terrarium with some decoration is not enough. You need to set it up in a way that it will provide for the needs of your chameleon. Unlike humans, chameleons are cold-blooded animals, which means they do not maintain their own body temperature. They can only influence their body heat by their surroundings. In nature, chameleons will lay in direct sunlight to warm their bodies up, and they can cool down by simply moving into the shade, or they can lose some heat by evaporating moisture from the open mouth. You have to provide a setup in your terrarium so that your chameleon can do the same as in nature. I did this by placing a stick right below the heat lamp. The stick he's sitting on now, so it's right below the heat lamp, and he can choose to sit there if he wants to warm up, or if he wants to cool down, he can sit down here in the shade, or just lower in the terrarium where it's colder. Basically you're creating a heat gradient inside the terrarium, but this is done naturally when you use a heat lamp, so it's warmer at the top and colder at the bottom. But still I advise to use a lot of plants so he can sit in the shadow if he's really hot. You can buy a heat lamp in every reptile shop or on the internet. The chameleon should be not able to touch the heat lamp as it's very hot and it can harm himself. For my UV light I have like a mesh in front of it so he can touch it, but I got it from the previous owners and I think they made a mistake because the UV light won't get that hot. So now I just hang it out of reach so he can't reach the heat lamp, but still I want to put something over it just to be sure. So when Erik was a baby he actually touched the heat lamp. I can still see that on his back, there's like a piece missing. So just be careful and hang your heat lamp in a way that your chameleon can't touch it. So a good environmental temperature for your chameleon is 28 to 32 degrees Celsius by day. So that's 82 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. 18 to 25 degrees Celsius by night, which is 64 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. And right under the heat lamp, so where he's sitting now, it should reach around 38 degrees, that's 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So only a heat lamp isn't enough. Your chameleon also needs a UVB light. The UVB light makes sure that your chameleon can absorb all the calcium that is on its food. When a chameleon doesn't absorb enough calcium, a chameleon can get very weak bones that are prone to breaking. I also have a small LED strip at the top. It's blue. The previous owners put it in there, I'm not sure why. But I like the colors it gives, especially during the evening. And he doesn't seem to mind it, so I'll just leave it there. So for all the lights I suggest you to buy a timer. A timer basically turns the light on and off automatically. So when the pins are down, the lights will go on, and when the pins are up, the lights will go off. So I attach the timer to this plug hub or whatever it's called. And then when the timer goes off, all the lamps go off. So the lamps go here at the top, and all my lamps go off. And Erik can go to sleep. If you use a timer, the lights will go on and off at the same time every day. This will create a rhythm. My chameleon actually knows the rhythm. So I turn the lights on at 8 in the morning and I turn them off at 8 at the night. And like just before 8, he will climb on top of his pole here. And he actually sleeps here every day. So just like 30 past 7 he will go here and start sleeping, and then at 8 the lights go off. So Erik is a field chameleon. They're from Yemen. And in Yemen in the summers the days have around 14 hours of light, and in the winter the days have around 10 hours of light. So to simulate the natural habitat, I chose for 12 hours of light in this terrarium. And when Erik goes to sleep, it's on top of that pole in the back, and they actually close their eyes, they curl up their tail, and they will just hold very tight on a branch or a plant, and they don't move at all during the night, so it's not active and it will not eat or walk around. So next to the day and night cycle, we also want to copy the relative air humidity from Yemen. So I looked up the air humidity in Yemen. I can show it here. So as you can see, the relative air humidity should be around 60 to 80%. I do this by spraying water in the terrarium regularly. And at the back there, I have like an air and humidity meter. I just rearranged my whole terrarium, so previously I could see it a bit easier, but I still managed to see it. There are a few ways to maintain the air humidity in your terrarium. You can do this by hand with a plant mister, or you can do it automatically with a fogger or a dripper. A fogger will release a fine mist of water at regular intervals. The dripper will just slowly drip water into your tank, usually, but the mesh from the top, it will drip down on a leaf or on a branch. Fogger works much better than a dripper for keeping the air humidity up. A fogger is much more complicated and expensive than a dripper though. And misting by hand works just as fine. So when you're home often, you can do it. So I do it by hand, and I usually do it 2 to 3 times a day. And as you can probably tell, Erik really wants to get out of his cage, so I want to show how I fog the terrarium. So I'll just open it and get into his plant outside of his terrarium. So this is the plant he usually sits at. He doesn't want to go on it. Oh. Okay. So for the misting, damn, it's empty. So for the misting I use like a hand mister. You can adjust basically the fineness of the water that comes out. So I usually do this and mist the whole terrarium. I usually do it when Erik is inside the terrarium, because he also drinks this way. He just licks the air drops from the leaves. And I just do this a few times a day to keep the air humidity up. and then I check it at the meter at the back. So as I said before, a chameleon drinks by licking the drips of water from the leaves. He can't see stagnant water, although he has 360 degrees of vision, well, almost. So after misting the cage, he usually licks some drops of water from the leaves or branches, and that's the way he drinks. So you can't put a bowl with water at the bottom of your terrarium, because he just can't see it and he won't drink from that. So to feed Erik, I use this tray and I attach some iron wire to it. When I give him some kind of worms, I put them in this tray and add some calcium powder, and then I can just attach the iron wire to the back of the terrarium. This way you can find the worms and you can eat them. If I buy grasshoppers, I just let them loose in this cage because they just walk around and you can catch them themselves. So as I said before, make sure that there's at least one branch under the heat lamp. So for me that's this branch, it's right under the heat lamp, so you can choose to warm up there. And if he wants to, he can also go down to lower its temperature. A chameleon loves to hide between leaves when it's sleeping, so make sure there are enough leaves where you can hide or where you can just get out of sight. So a chameleon sometimes likes to hide during the day as well. So if you provide enough places where you can hide between leaves or just at the bottom in the shade, this will reduce a lot of stress. And because of this, your chameleon will look way better. Living plants are preferred. They are the best for your chameleon. Not only do they look good, they also increase the air humidity inside the terrarium, which benefits the chameleon a lot. Plants that are suitable for chameleons are, for example, the ficus, the umbrella tree, small palms, dracaenas, ivy or philodendron. And other plants can be used as decoration like ferns or bromelias. I have one in my setup, but apparently the grasshoppers like them and they eat their leaves. You will find them at the reptile fairs or garden centers. The only plants that are obviously not suitable for chameleons are plants with thorns or poisonous plants. You will also need branches or vines in your terrarium for your chameleon to climb on. You can buy them at aquaria, reptile shops, internet, or collect them from nature yourself. Just make sure when you do wash them with boiling water to kill any bacteria. And I advise you to try to use different sizes of branches so your chameleon can choose what branches to climb on, plus it will make your terrarium look more natural. The plant I have now, I have two of them, like one there and one right at the back, they are the same, and the bromelia. These plants tend to grow wherever they want, so sometimes it's nice to guide them by attaching them to the background. When you do attach them to the background, make sure they're attached well, because your chameleon will climb on them. And if it's not attached well, your chameleon can fall and hurt itself. So for the bottom of your terrarium there are many options. You can choose to just put a new paper or green felt on there. This is the easiest to clean. But I chose for the coconut peat. You can also use garden soil, because I think this looks more natural. It's a bit harder to keep clean, but yeah, I prefer to have the natural look. I don't advise to use your own garden soil, as there will be bacteria and worms and fungi in there. What you should not use as a ground cover are tree bark pieces or wood chips. Pieces of wood can stick to your chameleon's tongue when it's trying to catch insects, and this can be fatal when ingested, or you can just suffocate in them. So how many chameleons can you have in your terrarium? Well, adult chameleons can be housed together at all. They are very solitary animals and they will not allow members of its same species in its own territory. Even males and females cannot be housed together. The chameleons will treat each other with hissing and bright coloration. So Erik actually, those patches on the side, they will turn really dark when he's mad. And when they're together, they will both turn very dark, and you can see they're upset. They will eventually fight and wound each other, and this causes a lot of stress. And you don't want that for your chameleon. So baby field chameleons can be housed together without any problems. They do not fight and do not have their own territory yet. Of course, that terrarium should be large enough, and they should have enough space to walk, enough plants to hide behind, and enough to climb. And when a field chameleon becomes around 4 or 5 months old, it should be moved to a terrarium of its own. When it's around 8 months old, they will reach sexual maturity, and then they should be definitely housed alone. Right, Erik? To summarize, choose between a terrarium or a net cage. The enclosure should be at least 100 centimeters high, 60 centimeters wide and 60 centimeters deep. You need to buy a heat lamp, a UV lamp, a thermometer and a humidity meter. Keep the temperature around 28 to 32 degrees Celsius by day and 18 to 25 degrees Celsius by night. Keep the humidity around 60 to 80%. To feed the chameleon, buy a small tray to put the worms in, and spray the plants with water by hand or use a fogger or a dripper. Buy plants that are safe for your chameleon. Living plants are preferred. Create enough spaces for your chameleon to hide, and make sure there's a spot for your chameleon right under the heat lamp to warm up. And for the ground cover, use newspapers, green felt or coconut peat. Just make sure you don't use wood chips because they can suffocate in them. And finally, only keep one chameleon in your terrarium. So if you want to know more about chameleons, or if you're interested in buying one but don't know where to start, or if you just want to see cool and funny videos about chameleons, consider subscribing to this channel to find out more about these beautiful animals.